Hello and welcome. Welcome to Plugging Along, a stream dedicated to LOTRO plugins. Last time on Plugging Along, we continued working on the Deadly Decoy plugin. First, we went into the Bullroarer test server and got some data for the plugin, specifically the health of the decoy at each level from 10 to 50. And then we went through the process of adding support for a health bar on the decoy display. This time we'll be continuing to make improvements to the plugin. I have some possible improvements to look at, but as always, feel free to jump into chat with your thoughts and questions. Okay, so hello, little redhead. All right, let me just double check that I haven't forgotten anything on a checklist. I have a feeling I've messed up this captioning thing that we're trying to do. I don't think it's doing it, but let me know. All right. Looks like we're good. Okay. So let me switch on over here to show. There we go. Okay. So where we last left off, let me actually back up a second. Let's take a look at our source control, because I did one or two things in between last session and this session. And just in case you're following along at home, let's catch you up. So one of the things I did was I added in levels 51 through 130. And what that looks like in our globals table is pretty straightforward. Whoa, that's big. Let's see, let's have some context. So in this file, which is just a Lua table, the Deadly Decoy max health per character level table, we have an entry for each level that we know about. We did 10 through 50 last time. And then afterwards, I didn't want to spend the whole time on stream just filling in this table, as delightful as that does sound. So afterwards, I went ahead and filled in 51 through 130 since we had access to the Bullroarer server. And I do hope you all got a chance to try out whatever you wanted to try out on Bullroarer last week. One of the things that came out of this was we were able to look at a graph of what happens. Let me see, did I save that? That would have been really clever of me. Plugins, oops. Cube plugins, Hunter at the decoy health by level. Oh, neat. Okay, so thank you, Excel, for making a simple graph. So this is what the decoy health looks like. And as we can see, things kind of start going off the rails at, oh, what is that number? At 105, we get a bit of a jump up, but it's still pretty much a linear progression throughout that expansion. Same thing at level 86, right? A jump up, but then a pretty linear path. And then we hit level 115 and things kind of go off the rails. So if you were wondering if the decoy kind of keeps pace with the character of, the morale of your character, the answer is maybe. But then again, some characters have hundreds of thousands of morale, and your Deadly Decoy at 130 has 110,000, which is not shabby, but will not survive too many hits. Exogenesis said, had a bit of fun building a brawler. Awesome. Yeah, I heard interesting things about trait trees, where two of them are kind of your normal trait tree, and then one of them isn't speccable into, but you can dip into it from either of the other two. And that sounds like a fun way to play around with trait trees. Oops, I didn't really mean to minimize that. Excellent. So by filling in all of the decoy levels by hunter level, we were able to kind of produce this nice graph. It doesn't do anything in-game, but it was nice to look at. So we have that filled in. And one of the things I noticed while I was doing that is it is possible to have a decoy below level 10. Did I forget to put that back in though? Hang on a moment. Yes, okay. So we actually have, you can first get a decoy at level 6. When you first spec into the Trapper of Foes yellow line, the first thing you get is the the decoy as part of the reward here. Let's see, can I come? We won't mess with that. So you get the decoy, and after you spend 5 points in the yellow line, then it gets upgraded to the deadly decoy. But what we saw from some testing, possibly not on stream, but definitely doing some testing last week, was that the health is the same whether or not it is a deadly decoy or a regular decoy. Actually, we can see that right here. So I'm at level 50. Max level on Treebeard. So if I pull this out, oh no, did I forget to load my plugin? I might have. All right, I did. Okay, 100 decoy. We definitely want to load that up. Excellent. So when we pull out the deadly decoy, we do get our lovely timer that we've been seeing, and as part of the debug code that's still in there, we can see that the health of the deadly decoy is 2,670. Cool. Well, what happens if we spec into yellow line but don't put more than 4 points into yellow? I've got a spare tree here. Let's do it. Oh no, I don't have enough money to re-specialize. Oh. I wonder if I've got anyone on that server who will send me money. I'm on Treebeard. No, it's okay. I'll go say hi to Winda. I know. Poor legs. I was just hanging out here in the three-bore statue fountain, whatever it's called.
Would you do something for me?
I will do something for you. I will take your VIP stuff and consume it. Okay. All right. Should have talked to Winda first. Okay. So this is an alt character, and this alt character does not have much in the way of money. So pardon me while I go grab some money from my shared bag here. If you're not familiar with this, you can talk to a vault keeper and buy, for no loss, you can just buy coins, you can stick those in your shared storage, and then you can grab them from any other character. And so that's a very handy way. We can see here I've got 100 plus 13 plus some, almost 114 gold available to any of my characters, no fuss. Oh, AZ says, hello, I haven't played since they added Mordor. What new content have they added since then? Well, that's a good question. Yeah. When I want to answer a question like that, what I'll often do is say, go to the LOTRO wiki. Oops. Well, Google knew what I meant. Oh, cool. And Little Redhead has actually put the page I was going to right there. Let's see. What do we got? So in here, we can see after Mordor came the Minas Morgul and the War of Three Peaks, and soon, quote unquote, Gundabad, which has been announced, Fate of Gundabad, which has been announced for fall 2021, but a more specific date has not yet been announced. They've also had a few sort of mini expansions, the Wildwood in Breland. I wonder if that's shown anywhere here. Nope. And the Further Adventures of Bilbo Baggins and some other content as well. Okay, cool. Thanks. Let me get back to selling this money. All right, so now that I've got my coins out of the bank, I sell them, great. Now I've got more than enough money to spare. I'll just get off the side of the road here. So let's re-specialize into Trapper of Foes. And what we can see is we start off with a decoy. That was a thing that we get. So if I pull out that decoy and it's just a normal decoy, we can still see it still has 2,670 morale, whether or not it's a deadly decoy. Just a moment. Okay. Oh yeah, you're welcome, AZ. I am a fan of LOTRO. I really like the setting, of course, and the aesthetic of it. So yeah, if that appeals to you, I definitely recommend giving it a shot. There's a free-to-play variation of it, and then you can, of course, pay a monthly subscription fee if you want to have access to a little bit more of the features and help support the developers and all that. Oh, thank you. I've got no water delivery. Okay, so we are doing a hunter-specific plugin here today. It's the Decoy plugin, or Deadly Decoy plugin. I named it before realizing that basically Decoy and Deadly Decoy are very, very similar in terms of what I want to support. I wanted a timer for how long it's going to be out, and I wanted a health bar for how much health it has. And once upon a time, I thought the Decoy had basically unlimited health, that things would just attack it. But it turns out that's not true. It has a specific amount of health, and when it is defeated, it goes away. So let's take a look at that. If we were to come on in to the Woe of the Willow instance, and I'm going to drop it down to level 40 because I do not have great equipment on Treebeard with this character. It's just an alt for the title, more or less. I'm not playing it regularly. But what we can see is as it's aggroing the trolls, we can see it is taking damage, and when it's taken enough damage, it disappears, and then they come after me, which is very sad. Yeah, even 10 levels above, this is not great for this particular character. So I made some other changes after the stream last week when I realized, wait a second, the only difference between Decoy and Deadly Decoy is the Deadly Decoy might blow up before it's defeated, or runs out of, well, when it runs out of time, it blows up. Whereas the regular one just goes away. Well, thank you, Little Redhead. I appreciate that. I die a lot in service of plugin testing. It happens. Okay, I wonder if anyone could tell me whether the closed captioning symbol has shown up or whether I have messed something up in the configuration file. All right, I'm hearing from outside my ear that closed captioning is not working. I'm gonna have to go figure out what's going on with that, but I'll do it later on. Okay, so we have a Decoy or a Deadly Decoy. Under the covers, they have the same health, and they have a timer. The regular Decoy will stay out for a minute. Here we go. It will stay out for a minute before disappearing. The Deadly Decoy stays out for 15 seconds before blowing up and then disappearing. But ultimately, they behave very similarly. So this isn't just a Deadly Decoy plugin. This is just a Decoy plugin. Chances are, if you're using Decoy, though, it will be deadly very quickly. But it works fine for normal decoys as well. And that was a fun thing to kind of realize last week. So let's see, what did we do? We added 51 to 30, fixed some combat parsing bugs. Well, what was that? Oh, let's see. So it turns out I had forgotten that sometimes a Deadly Decoy shows up as a Master Trapper's Deadly Decoy. And so I needed to fix this pattern for oh, that's interesting. Oh, I think this is before I fixed it to not even need to be a Deadly. So there was possibly some extra text for the Master Trapper. .star is a regular expression or pattern matching way of saying just consume stuff until we hit the text Deadly Decoy, and we'll keep on going, matching the pattern from there. So you can just follow up extra stuff you don't want to match. Cool. What else did we do? We added in those levels 6 to 9. We added support for the regular decoys as well. What does that look like? Well, we are either deploying with a benefit with Decoy or benefit with Deadly Decoy. Why do we care? Well, based on which message that comes in with. I think that music is so exciting, but I'm going to turn it down a little bit. Okay, Hopefully it's still there, just in the background. So based on which it is, a decoy or a deadly decoy, that's going to affect how long we want that base timer to be, 15 seconds or 60 seconds. So we do want to distinguish between just a basic decoy and a deadly decoy. But either way, when it's defeated, we stop caring. So we don't need it to be a deadly decoy that dies, just any decoy. If it dies, it dies. And same thing with the damage taken. We're scoring hits on a decoy. It doesn't have to be a deadly decoy. And so we just got rid of that deadly specification there. All right, anything else interesting? Okay. Added an extra function where either deploying a decoy or a deadly decoy, and that just changes the parameter where it's either true or false. Is it deadly or not, kind of thing. Cool. And then an extra parsing. So it's either deployed or it's deployed as a deadly, that kind of thing. Pretty straightforward. And the other complication was in the Hunter window itself, now we need to support either 15 seconds or 60 seconds. And that's what's going on here, is that expire time is no longer 15 seconds constant here, it's defined elsewhere. Same thing there. And this is in service of getting rid of those magic numbers we've talked about, where you just have a number and you just have to guess what that number means. In this case, 32 is a number of pixels, but you wouldn't know it just from looking at that. Whereas if I had been clever and said, local pixel or width in pixels, right? If I had said width in pixels equals 32, that would have been way easier to figure out what this is doing. But we'll revisit that, I'm sure. And then finally we had that change to the show where we said, is it deadly or not? Okay, so we're going to set a dynamic value. It's either 15 or 60. Neat. No, don't save those changes. I wanted to go ahead and put this into the wiki. So if you're ever looking for this information and we're not online here, if you search for decoy on the wiki now, yes, there's lots of cool plugins. There's even a command here, maybe Little Red Head will put it in, to list some of the streamer team's favorites. Awesome, thank you so much. So in the decoy, I went ahead and updated, based on the experiments I did for this plugin, to say, hey, it doesn't last forever, which is what it was saying, that it doesn't have a health bar so it can't die. It can. So this table is based off of what we were looking at last week, where you just summon out a decoy at each level. You see how much health it has using some of the functions that we were looking at. And then, bam, it's a table. So anyone has access to these raw stats now, which isn't to say they might not change in a future release. After all, Setting Sun Games is constantly tweaking class skills, class balances. So it wouldn't surprise me if that table gets out of date at some point. But for now, it is accurate, and the next major release probably won't affect it, fingers crossed. Unless they make the health go up, then I'm all for it. Cool. So that kind of catches us up to where we are. We have probably cooled down enough that I can switch back to having a deadly decoy. Bam! Which is nicer for testing because it blows up faster. Okay, so one thing this doesn't do is give you an estimate of how much damage the decoy does. That might be nice, but I think that's way more complicated based off of your all sorts of factors, including some of your traits here. Which one? One of them increases how much damage it does. One on crits. There's all sorts of stuff going on here. But I'll have to revisit that later. Okay, so what are we going to do today? Well, I had a couple of thoughts of what we could do this time. The first is, sometimes it's a little inconvenient just to be waiting for the Deadly Decoy button to become available. Yes, it's only, it's a 15-second decoy, right, because there is Super duper awesome combat traps. Highly recommended if you're going into yellow line and testing the deadly decoy. It'll reduce all of your traps by 15 seconds. Normally, deadly decoy has a 30-second cooldown. But principle stands, it would be... my computer's making some funny noises. Let's hope it's done doing that. Okay, so one of the things that's nice to do is have an options panel where you can present different options to the user, and that's also a place where you can tuck debugging things. For instance, let me load up the Deed Tracker plugin here. In the Deed Tracker plugin, excuse me, when you go into the options panel, there's a bunch of different options for how the Deed Tracker works. And if you have debug mode turned on, there's also a bunch of things for helping the developer do things. So for instance, if I wanted to act as if I had completed the Breland Slayer deed, I bet it's not called that. Let's see. What is it actually called? Slayer of Breland, of course. Slayer of... It's much better if you spell it correctly. Cool. I just completed a bunch of deeds according to the deed tracker. That was way faster than actually going out and killing a bunch of sickle flies. So building in some debug capability is really handy as a plugin developer. So we're going to go ahead and do that. Let's see, AZ. There's a book I used for my hunter that changed the toolbars. You could add collapsing bars that when you hover to from the box, expanded to reveal more bars. You can also add it so bars should up based on your focus level. Well, that sounds really cool. I know that there are, there's at least one plugin out there. We actually looked at it a few weeks ago called Hunter Focus that specifically changes how you can see your focus. Let's pull that up. So it's definitely possible to key behavior based off of your focus level. Oh yeah, if you haven't used it before, the LOTRO plugin compendium is very handy for automating the process of downloading and installing plugins that it knows about. Not every plugin is available through the compendium, but it's a nice routine way. Like you saw right there, it was super fast for me to go ahead and make that happen. Okay, so we have the Hunter Focus. Let's go ahead and check out some of its options. Display horizontally, yeah, sounds good. Looks like I can move it around. Can I change the size of it? Yes, I can. Awesome. So if I go ahead and gather focus, oh, this is pre-patch, isn't it? I'll have to go get that patch. So where that's coming from is the LOTRO interface site, lotrointerface.com. And in here, if we search for Hunter Focus, awesome, we can see there is a bug fixes that I put out a few weeks ago that has been downloaded by 363 people. That's fantastic. Cool. So we'll just go ahead and extract the download, and from that you'll see a folder called Dehor Plugins. Great. So this is what it looks like to manually install. We come into Plugins, we see Dehor Plugins here. Awesome. We just want to drag this into the same location. And Windows, if you're using Windows, will offer to overwrite any files that have the same content. So, yeah, let's do that. Great. So let's go ahead and reload stuff. So coming into the Plugins Manager, unload everything. That's fine. And reload the Hunter Focus. Great. So the Hunter Focus doesn't do the things you were talking about specifically, but you can see that it's keyed off of, okay, I need to stop earning focus every 5 seconds. Great. You can see that it's just a different way to show you your focus level. For those people who have a harder time tracking it down by your auto attack button, you can instead place it wherever you want, and that's pretty cool. Or if you wanted it along the side of your window, and you can click it properly, excellent, you can come in here and actually set it to vertical mode instead. No problem there. Awesome. So the Hunter Focus plugin does not adjust what bars are available, but it does do a nice job of showing you your focus in a different manner. So that's just a thing that's out there. I'm going to go ahead and unload that. If you are not familiar with it, let's see, what's it called? Travel window. Travel window. Travel window is great. I'm going to go ahead and add it. So it, once again, Plugin Compendium took care of downloading, extracting, and moving the files into the right place. So we just had to hit the green arrow to refresh in here. I did. Yes, there's an old travel window, and now there's a travel window 2. Highly recommend travel window 2. They're doing a great job of keeping it alive. Okay, so 2 things. You'll get a window called travel and a little suitcase here. If you right click on the suitcase, you can come in to options, which lets you do all sorts of things. Also, there's a mode in here for the icon grid. So if you just know the icons of what each of your travel skills looks like, then then that can be a really fast way to just be like, oh, okay, personal housing. You can also click from here. So if I wanted to go ahead and guide to Rivendell, I just click that, bam, off we go. I did not want to guide to Rivendell, but if I did. So travel window, highly recommended. And as a hunter, especially as like a level 130 hunter with a bazillion and 1 travel skills, that just puts a bunch of them way off in their own little separate window, so you don't have to worry about that. As he says, focus bar would be really awesome to assign skills to levels that show up ready to use as you hit that focus. Yeah, it's quite possible there are active plugins like that or working plugins like that. I just don't play a hunter enough to know what they are. Okay, so we're gonna stop worrying about that and go back to the Hunter Deadly Decoy. Okay, so being able to do some debugging is really useful. Having some options is really useful. We might be able to do both of those with one. Because the other 2 things I think would be really neat is to be able to move this window. Because right now it's just sitting there. There's no way to move it. And to be able to change its size. Maybe you want it bigger, maybe you want it smaller. Right now we have artificially stretched it out. But in doing that, we've done it in a way that has made this not square. And so we can come back and kind of polish that up too. And you know what? I just thought of another thing. Localize the plugin. Localizing the plugin means that someone could more easily come along and translate it to their language, because LOTRO is supported natively in both French and German as well as English. And I think there's even an unofficial Russian client floating around out there. So making it so that there's a single place, a single obvious place to add in those extra strings, and as they're added in, they're just automatically used, is really helpful. And we have techniques for doing that too. So just putting that there so I remember to do it. Awesome. Let's get started. So how do we make something show up in the options area? The options of the plugin. Now, we actually did this not too long ago on the Opaque quest tracker. Oh, they still haven't added that. Okay. Well, we'll just come on in here. So the Opaque quest tracker was a simple plugin that we did a while back, which was just an accessibility plugin to make it easier to read the quest area, the quest tracking area. So it was just a box. You could move it, you could change the size, change the color, the opacity, all of those things, lock it into place and be done with it. Let's go ahead and download that. Oops. Okay, once it's downloaded, if you're installing a plugin manually, you can go ahead and extract it using your favorite extracting tool. I just use the built-in one for Windows. And then in there, you'll find a folder called Cube Plugins. Great. Oh, of course, it's already there because it's in my system. But if you needed to, you could drag in the Opaque Quest Tracker contents into your plugins directory. I'm being a goof today. Cool, okay, there's our Opaque Quest Tracker. The Opaque Quest Tracker has those very things we were talking about, the ability to lock the window in place so that you don't accidentally drag it around, and the ability, in this case, to change the opacity, but I could see doing that same thing to change the size of the stuff, of the image. So cool, let's play around with that. And I'd like to take a page from maybe the Mini Raid playbook. If you haven't seen Mini Raid, it's a fun miniature UI for showing you people, your fellowship and raid members, morale, and other stats. And one of the things I really like about it is, let's see, Mini Raid show. Nope, Mini Raid options. Cool. One of the things I really like about it is they have let's go ahead and move that out of the way. They have a layout preview where you can see how big this is going to be and position it based on that preview. Even if you don't have 12 people, if you don't have 2 fellowships worth of people in your raid, you can still use this preview mode to act as if you did. Or you could even preview it with 24 people. If you know you're going to be in a 24-person raid, maybe you want to go ahead and pre-position it so it's still pretty visible and doesn't get in your way. Or maybe you just want maybe you're a healer and you don't need to see battle, you just need to see health, so this is perfect for you. So I think being able to preview would also be good. All right, so enough talking. Those are some thoughts I'm bringing into this. Okay. I don't think we actually need to be in an instance for this. Though the dramatic music is dramatic. All right, back to the jaunty music of Brie. Okay, so I'll just hop up on this rock here and close the encounter travel. Nope. Opening, it's the opposite of closing it. Cool. And just to start fresh, unload everything. Here's just the Hunter Deadly Decoy. We can see it's working. Okay, so let's pull up how the Opaque Quest Tracker does its options window to remind ourselves, because this is a thing I'll often do, is I need to do a thing. This plugin over here does the thing. How does it do it? Great. Reinventing things from scratch is something you can do, but you don't have to do it. If there's another plugin, especially one that you've already written that does the thing, that's great. Let's figure out how that works. Whoops. Okay, so we have a function in here called draw options control. And I hope the text is large enough to make out here. Third floor. Reinventing things from scratch is fun. I do enjoy it from time to time. We might find different ways of doing things, but for a stream like this, which is kind of focusing on the fundamentals of plugin development, I think it's useful to revisit things, even if we're just sort of doing it quickly. Thorlor is absolutely correct, though. It's not always the most productive use of your time. If you're going to do lots of different plugins, or if you hope to have these plugins around for a long time, and you only have a couple of them, then it can be really useful to have some commonalities that you can use between each of them. That being said, let's make an options panel. So how do we do that? In Opaque Quest Tracker, we just call this from the main function. The main function is called, it does things like loading settings, and it also draws an options control. But what does that mean? Well, while the plugin is loading, there's a special variable called plugin, cleverly named, and it has a get options panel function that you can define. And if you do that, then whatever it is that is returned from that, if it's a control, and we can look at that in just a moment, If it's a control, then LOTRO will host it in this panel back here, and you can put whatever you want there. So what is a control? Well, a control is part of the turbine.ui hierarchy here, and most everything is that you can draw on the screen is a control from an inheritance perspective. Windows are controls, scroll bars controls, tree nodes are controls, everything's a control. Now, what about something like a turbine.ui.lotro.button? Is that a control? Sure is, because the LOTRO button is a button, which is a label, which is a scrollable control, which is a control. So we could put a single button into that options area. We're going to do more than that, but we could. Okay, so do we have a main function? We don't. What do we have? Chat received. Yeah, this is a pretty straightforward thing. Let's go ahead and just do the same function here. Draw options control. It's really more like laying it out, but I'm not picky. And just in case there's going to be more things like, say, a save file that has options in it, let's go ahead and make ourselves a function main here that can kind of host those things. So we could do things like load settings. We can, or register for unload. I might want to do most of these things. Let's see. Nope. Draw options control. Awesome. And we could even do the hey, we've loaded. Turbine.shell.writeLine. Now, we haven't done the localization stuff yet. But just out of curiosity, what does that loaded message look like? Neat. Loaded. And plugin description, what did we do there? Neat. Well, heck, let's just lift that straight up. Plugin name equals, again, we have that special variable during plugin loading. We can get the name and get the version. That's useful just because we can print out the version without remembering to update it here as well as in the .plugin file. So we have mistyped a thing. Neat. So we have a plugin description. And we can go ahead and use that here. Neat. All right, anything else? Well, that's definitely a start. So the draw options control, again, it can have whatever we want, but ultimately, if we have a bare control in which we put other things, that gives us the flexibility to do whatever we want instead of just, say, a button. So if we go ahead and say options equals and do the same thing, turbine.ui.control, then that gives us a control that we can then put other controls into. So what do? We say the get options panel is now defined to be a function that when called returns this thing right here. Awesome. Now, what we did last time, and what will work really well here, is to go ahead and set a slightly off-black background color and give it a size, and that will help us see it here in the options panel. So let's take a look. Does it look? Well, Hunter Assist loaded. Awesome. Oh, but that's this message. We never called main. So let's call main instead. Come back in. Great. Loaded Hunter Deadly Decoy version 1.0.0 by Cube. That's me. Okay. That means if we go to options, we can see the not quite black background, which indicates, yes, we passed it a control. LOTRO is hosting that control in this panel. Everything is working great. Okay. So the first thing is, I mentioned a debug button. act as if we just saw the message, make the window show up. That could be really useful. So let's go ahead and have some sort of a flag where we can easily turn that on and off. Now, in the deed tracker, I do that with something called show debug options. And you know what? I am going to steal for myself wholeheartedly on this stream, so might as well do it again. Show debug options equals true. And then in here, we can just say if show debug options double equals true, then show stuff. So for more complicated options layouts here, especially where you have maybe optional stuff, it can be useful to have a function that says add this line to options, add this line to options, add this line to options. But because we're only going to have 3 or 4 things here, it's fine. We're going to just know that we could do that if we needed to. Thurlow says, as long as I give myself credit in the comments, it's okay to steal for myself. I'm glad to hear that because I'm going to do it liberally. Although I also borrow from some of the cool things other plugin developers are doing, and I do try to credit them as well when possible. Okay, so let's start with some debug buttons. We know we want to pretend Decoy was launched, and maybe even pretend Deadly Decoy. Cool. So how do we do that? Well, we can just do that with a button. And we've got buttons here, change color, use current settings as a default. What do those look like in the code? All right. It's a turbine.ui.lotro.button. Excellent. Let's do a couple of those. So local decoy button, debug decoy button equals, and then turbine.ui. And this is a LOTRO button. So it's got that nice skinning there with the blue, but if you change your skins, it will go along and change with it. Button. Okay, first thing we want to do with a control is parent it. If it's not part of a hierarchy that ends with a top-level control, it will not get drawn on the screen. It's a very easy way to stress yourself out when something is not appearing. So debug decoy button, set parent. And everything's going to be parented by this options panel right here. All right, what else are we going to do? We can set the text to say deploy decoy. Never miss a chance for alliteration if you can. Okay, what else? We want to go ahead and set the position. It's nice to have a little margin over from the left so you're not bumping up against the left. And let's actually, what do we have? We have a height of 200. Let's bump that up to 250 and put this 200 down because we're going to want any debug stuff to be at the bottom below everything else. And then finally, the width. Buttons do not auto size for their component, for the text that's inside of them. So let's start out with 100 and see how that goes. And then finally, we do want to know if the button gets clicked. And to do that, we go ahead and assign to the click callback a anonymous function here, sender args. And in that function, we just want to do whatever we do elsewhere. Decoy deployed. Awesome. Call that function, and it pretends like we just deployed a decoy. Let's give that a try. Let's come back in and load the 100 of the decoy. Awesome. We see we have an error here. Attempt to index. Oh, yes. So on line 121, we can see here, I said, hey, we're using a turbine.ui.lotro, and Lua said, I don't know what that is, because we haven't imported the files that tell it. So let's go ahead and do that right there. We go ahead and add our import statement and load away. Sweet. Now, in the options, we have a deploy a decoy, and we can see that's barely wide enough. Let's go ahead and knock that up to 125. That'll make it just a little bit nicer to look at. Awesome. Now, if you're going to have variable length text, for instance, if you're supporting localization, it is possible to resize something like a button or a label to take that into account. But for here, it's just going to be 125 pixels. Okay, what happens if we click it? Sweet. The plugin acts as if it saw something in the combat log that said I deployed a decoy. And now it's just counting down. So there is no decoy, so it won't ever see damage happening, but we can fix that. But for now, let's go ahead and do the deadly decoy also while this is ticking on down. Now, it's going to actually be very similar. So if I were being a cheating person, we could just copy this in, and anywhere where it says debug decoy, we can go ahead and say deadly, and deploy deadly decoy. Go ahead and set that width to maybe 175, and bring that back in. Neat. Only problem, it's still calling the same function. We need that deadly decoy deployed. Awesome. Now, the other problem is those buttons are going to be on top of each other because they're both 200 down. So let's go ahead and make this 200 over and see if that's unwise. That was unwise. In fact, it only needed to be 150 over. I looked at the wrong variable. Okay, now we can see that's a little wide. I was hoping we could get them both on the same line. I think that's a fool's errand. So, as I am not a took, we'll go ahead and maybe put that down at 230 instead. Okay, great. So we can do the same thing. When we click that, we can see the much faster timer showing us that the deadly decoy is ticking on down. Now, the deadly decoy, we don't look for an explosion. All we look for is either it's been 15 seconds or the deadly decoy dies. So it disappears as expected when the timer runs out. Now, since there's no decoy, it's never going to receive any damage. Maybe we should add a thing for that too while we're at it. So what would that look like? Well, let's add a line. In fact, maybe let's make this a little bit taller. Will the options automatically have a scroll bar? They will. Awesome. So good job, Plugin Manager, for giving us that automatically. Okay, take some damage. So we would like a label that tells us, damage, and then a text box that lets us take it in, and then maybe even a button that says go. I don't know. I'm just imagining here. Let me come back into the deed tracker, which has a lot of different ways of doing options. And this is kind of what I was thinking, is a little description, a text box, and a button. Yeah, like that. In fact, in the debug area, we don't even have to be that verbose. We can just have a text box and the text damage exclamation point, and that would be fine because it's just us. And if we type in 17 instead of the digits 17, then that's on us. So let's come back in, and we need a text area, a text box, and we need a button. Well, we already know how to do a button. Let's start with that. So, in fact, if I were the cheating sort, I might copy an existing button in here. I might go ahead and say debug take damage, and then right here, damage. Cool, and then we just need to change what we're doing there. Oops. So we have a button here. Deploy dummy deadly decoy. I like it. Hang on a sec. I bet that won't sound nearly as good in French. But one of the nice things about debug code is I tend to assume it's going to be me reading it, and I don't speak French, so I'm not going to localize it to French. That would only hurt me in the long run. Okay, so we do want to change the position here. Let's go ahead and knock it on down to 260. The width is probably too wide. Let's go ahead and bring it down to 100. And what does it look like to take damage? Well, there's a function called Decoy Damage. That sounds good. Let's try that. In fact, anything else? Yeah, no. Okay. So, Decoy Damage. Now, we don't actually have damage yet, so I'm just going to say, I don't know, 100. And we'll be able to see that. So, unload, reload, options, damage. Awesome. So, all my text boxes are too small now. So, we'll go ahead and do 150 and 200 and see if that's big enough. Oh, almost. A little crowded, but that's okay. Deploy, dummy decoy. Awesome. Now, there's nothing that stops us from doing multiples in a row. If I say deploy a dummy decoy, then that may just take over. Let's see. Neat. Now, in practice, you can never have more than one decoy going because the normal decoy has a cooldown of 1 minute. No, sorry, 30 seconds. Dead of the decoy also has 30 seconds. You can bring it down to 15, but it explodes after 15 seconds. Now, a regular decoy you could potentially bring out, but if you already have a decoy out, the game locks you out from having a second one. So the plugin doesn't behave badly, we can see. If it thinks that you've just summoned out 4 decoys, it's fine. But in reality, we wouldn't expect that to happen. Okay. Oh, we didn't do damage. So let's go ahead and summon this out, and then damage. Ah, neat. Now I can't actually click very fast, and so 100 isn't really enough here. But that's where being able to scale it up would be really useful. Or we just do like a quarter of its health based off of the current level. That could be really easy. But I like the idea of being able to put in a little text field here. It's nice for remembering how to do that. Okay. So we need a text box. Whenever I want to remember what that looks like, we can just come on in and we can see, hey, there's a LOTRO text box class. Let's play around with that. Local debug damage amount equals turbine.ui.lotro.textbox. Neat. Now, first thing, remember to parent it. And it's just going into the options panel. And then we don't need to set the text, but we do need to set the position. We want it to be on the same row as this damage button, maybe even to the left of the damage button. So let's go ahead and set the position to 10 to 60 and set the width to, I don't know, 100? Let's see if 100 is good enough. And then make sure this one starts to the right of that. Okay, well, what does that look like? That looks wrong. But that's okay. Looks like we set a width. We should probably go ahead and do a set size instead. We can use these controls inherited from control, of course, to set size or independently set width and set height. Let's go ahead and set, let's see, cool. Control also supports multi-line text. We don't want that, so we're going to also turn that off while we're at it. I appreciate the French translations in chat. Thank you. Okay, we can see that now it is shorter, and if I press enter, I don't start a new line, so that's going to help us get into to not get into trouble. Oh, it was a funny thing the other day. Someone I was talking to was having a spot of trouble with the auction house window, because in the auction house window they forgot to turn off the multi-line trigger here. Like, they forgot to call that function we just did. So if you type 1 enter, you start a new line, and your 1 disappears up above because it's only 1 line tall, which is delightful. I don't know how it behaves if you do that, but I do know I was not expecting that to be a multi-line control. I mean, it's a little thing, you get used to it, but under the covers, they could fix that by something very similar with a, whoops, wrong window, with a set of multi-line false, but on the client side instead of in any sort of a scripting side. And we know that they can do that because item name. If we type in hatchet, pressing enter doesn't start a new line in that field. In fact, it activates the search box, which is what you would expect. Cool, okay. So we have damage. Now the only thing we need to do, let's scooch that over a little bit. And we just need to look at that text. So, get text. Now that's not, we're not putting any error checking in here, so that is not going to behave well if we don't give it an actual number. But if I do give it a number, let's summon out that decoy here. If I go ahead and give it a number, say 500, and click damage, we can see it is, oops, it is respecting that amount. So if I go ahead and do 10,000 damage to this thing, it's gone. In fact, it's gone right away from that. Whereas 1,000 damage is only about a third of its health and gone. And we can see it behaves nicely for either the dummy or the decoy or the deadly decoy. Okay, so that's some basic debugging techniques, and that's really helpful if you want to execute some part of the plugin code without having to do the thing that would normally do that. In this case, maybe I'm out running around with some friends in the wilderness and I'm spec blue because I want to be a little bit more mobile. And I literally do not have a targeting dummy to test with. Well, that's okay. Bam. Now I can play around with size, location, all of that. Now, I can't help but notice that when I deploy the decoy, it's not on top. And as a hunter, I feel like my hunter plugin is probably the most important thing. And so let's play around with the Z order. The Z order is how deep or high into the screen something is. So the set Z order takes a number, awesome. Controls with higher Z orders render on top of controls with lower Z orders. Lovely. Let's give that a try. Now that's the actual whole thing, the hunter deadly decoy window. So let's come on in here and say self set as the order of a lot. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now, if that was a signed number internally, we should probably not do enough on the last one because that would be a negative number. We don't want that. So, a large number. We'll just go with that. Let's see what happens. Oh, much better. Look at it being on top of this window. Even when I drag this window around, lovely. Now, there's a compromise between not on top and definitely on top, where you can have windows being brought temporarily to the top, above other things. If this control could be clicked, if we were respecting mouse input, then when we were clicked, we could say, go ahead and just bring us to the top of the top of the stack right now. But since we've designed this to not be clickable, Okay, Thurlor has confirmed that if you want to be in front of pretty much everything except the map, a Z order above 0 will do it. So my Z order of all the things was perhaps a little bit excessive. But what's neat is even if you're looking at the map and like, okay, where are we going? You still know, uh-oh, my decoy just died, which I feel like might actually be a feature, not a bug. Neat. Okay. Bullroarer digs in a little bit more. If your Z order is 0, it'll be on the same relative level as the rest of the UI. So whatever is the last thing that was clicked is brought in front of other things. And below 0 will always be behind other things. Since we can't click, that does, without coming in and unlocking the window, which we haven't actually written yet, but is on the to-do list. Since we can't click the window, we can't bring it forward. Now, I'd have to consult with an actual hunter, but I feel like knowing that your decoy has died is a feature, not a bug, even if you've got a map up. So I think that might be a thing to either default to, or we could even come to do and say always on top option. Cool. And then if it's always on top, do 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. Whereas is 0-ish. Neat. Little redhead who plays a hunter a lot, I know, says yes, knowing the decoy has been defeated would be useful. I think so, or has blown up, either way. But just because if you want to, you can be running just like this during the map, and so looking to see where you're running on the map and still knowing when the decoy blows up. Sure, why not? We'll go ahead and place that as a maybe. Yes, it's an X decoy. Bullroarer confidently thinks I don't use the map or dialogues in combat. Oh, that's so cute. I probably shouldn't use the map in combat, you're right, but I wouldn't go so far as to say I actually don't do that. Yeah, I think an option. I think an always on top option would be nice. Cool. All right, so we have added a debug button to bring up the UI as if it was seen in the combat log. That's awesome. Now, moving the window around. We actually did this in the Opaque quest tracker. Let's see what that looks like. There was a lock the window in place option. Oops, excuse me. A lock the window in place option. AZ asks, what about a system message that tells you the decoy was destroyed? That's a good question. Now, there's 2 ways to do messages. If you're talking a chat message, then a plugin can only write to your standard output, which is just one of the chat channels here. But there's something that stops us from just writing some text up on the screen that says, oh no, run away, or whatever. In fact, you could even have that be configurable option. What text would you like to see when the decoy is destroyed? And then you could just, flash up on the screen there. I think that's beyond today, but I think it's a neat idea. Oh, speaking of neat ideas, what was it called? There was a plugin that Little Redhead linked me to the other day, and I'm hoping she'll find it again for me, which was a plugin that had the feel of a make-your-own-adventure style system, where you could define adventures and you could have your own dialogue, essentially, that it can tell when you're talking to a specific NPC because your target changes. So it can be like, oh, you're talking to Wenda. Here's the dialogue box for Wenda, and it can present its own whole system within the plugin system. And that is fantastic. Let's see. Ah, neat. Okay, let me just open up this random URL from chat. That's safe. Okay, so I haven't had a chance to look at this yet, but this sounds amazing. The Your Own Adventures plugin. And so they're using a UI very similar to a Quest. The samples are all in French because it's a French developer. But, oh, man, one of the things that I loved, there was a YouTube video, like a trailer. There we go. I don't know how well this is going to stream. But, well, that's an advertisement. not going to have that. Okay. I've muted it, but this thing I specifically wanted to bring up was, yeah, that idea of, oh, you clicked on Nora, so it brings up this dialog box as if you are talking to her with clickable like dialogue options like yes or no or whatever, and oops. So you can just talk to an NPC from within the framework of this plugin. It looks fantastic, and the plugin can track that you have killed the enemies as part of the progress on this. So it's like its own questing system where you can be like, you know what, we need more quests around whatever. And I can't wait for the developers to do it, so I'm going to write it myself. I think it's so fantastic. I haven't had a chance to play around with it yet. If you do, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that because so cool. Oh, and of course they have support for achievements. And they have a built-in rock, paper, scissors, which I find great. That's so cool. Anyway, I should not get distracted. Onyx says, I want to increase the default text size. Yeah. Text size in general, of course, you can do a little bit in the dialogue windows in game, but there's a lot of people who have better, higher resolution monitors than I do that have problems seeing things. So fingers crossed that's something that they are able to tackle as they continue their development efforts. Okay. So an option to unlock for dragging. Sweet, let's do it. So we're going to be done with the debug stuff. All right, lock/unlock the window for dragging. Now, how are we going to do this? The window is invisible most of the time. Well, my default would be to make the window visible in a dragging mode. When the window is unlocked, then you can click and drag it wherever, and then when it's locked, it goes back to being invisible unless you happen to have a decoy up or something. So that would be my default. Bam. So let's start with there and see how that feels. Okay, so we had a checkbox to lock the window. Well, great. I love checkboxes. Oh. Hello, Flindor Hunges. Welcome to Plugging Along. In case you just popped in, we are playing around with the Hunter Deadly Decoy plugin, which gives you knowledge of when your Deadly Decoy is going to blow up, or if, for instance, it were taking damage, how much health it has left. That does not get old. Okay. Oh, awesome. Your main is a hunter. Well, if you play a Yellow Line Hunter ever, then this might be a plugin that you would find useful. When Little Red Head and I were first playing on Treebeard and we got to level 20 and were able to start doing a mission, we found that the damage from the Deadly Decoy was far outpacing our own damage and really wanted to know when the decoy was going to blow up to make sure as many enemies as possible were nearby. And from that spawned the desire for this. Fondle, the great philosopher of our age, asks, did you manage to figure out how the health of the decoy scales? Sorry, that was a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy reference, which I assume your name is also, so I approve. Not that my approval means much, but I enjoy the stories. Yeah, so I went ahead and just did a quick little graph here. This is how the decoy health scales. And as you can see, it's pretty linear. Even with little health bumps at 75 and 85, the resulting health is pretty linear. Even here at 106 through 114, and then from 115 through 130, it seems to switch into an exponential mode or a linear with a really high slope, depending on how you look at things. But compared to what came before, definitely an exponential feel to that. There's all sorts of things you could do with those numbers. But for anyone curious, in case you missed it, on the LOTRO wiki, I have added the raw numbers. So if you go to Decoy, then the decoy or depth of decoy's starting morale is based on the level of the hunter at the time of summoning. So if you just click show on that table, all the numbers there, as they are currently in the game, are available. So if you want to do your own analysis or try to figure out some sort of underlying thing going on, have at it. The numbers are out there. Cool. Oh, well, those Onyx says, so you weren't able to figure out a way to target the decoy to get the health directly. Well, that is mostly true. I did put in some code, and this is how I got the values, where you click on a thing and it spits out the health. But the deadly decoy is not considered a player pet the way a lore master's bear or even a runestone, I think, because a trapper. I'm not sure why. Well, it just disappeared. I'm not sure why, but maybe it's because they don't show you the health, even though there is health. I'm not sure why, but it's not treated as a normal pet. And so you can't just say get pet on the local player and then get a health from that. There is no pet returned when you do that. So I just fell back to observing that the health did not seem to change when I had gear on or off. It only seemed to change when my level was changed. And so my theory, until someone gives some counter evidence, is that the only thing that matters is the level of the hunter when it's summoned out, and it's just a fixed amount. That could be wrong. There could be other things in play, but it has been consistent. Whether or not it's a deadly or whether it's a normal decoy, same amount of health. No matter what I'm wearing or not wearing, same amount of health. So I figured this was a safe enough way to go, is just get the values for now, put them all down into a table, a Lua table. And so when we go into the globals, we can see the deadly decoy max health per character level, and it's just all of them. I would love for a more scripting way to do it, but when in doubt, a lookup table of static knowledge is fine. Fibro Jedi, I was chatting with Fibro Jedi on Twitter of all places. I'm not really on Twitter very much. And Fibro Jedi was asking about a plugin that could look at equipment in your inventory and say, is this better than something that I'm wearing? And that seemed like a really challenging problem because there's no Lua specific way to get the stats on the stuff that you're wearing. You can get some basic stuff like the durability and the rarity level and some stuff like that, but you can't be like, does this give you will? On the other hand, if you have access to a dump of data of every item in the game, you could just be like, well, here's a file that contains all of the heavy armor in the game. Go nuts. And just look it up in there, and now you know how much will's on it. Look it up on there, and now you know how much strength is on it, or dexterity, or whatever. Agility, sorry. And so it's okay if there's no Lua interface to it if you can get the data in some other way. So we got the health by just looking. Is there any online source, asked Onyx, like Wowhead, that might let you query with Lua? So I'm hearing two different parts of that question. First of all, within Lua and LOTRO, there is no talking with the outside world. So if you're talking about a plugin that is running within the game as you are playing, there is no outside connection or anything like that. If you're asking, are there dumps of game data available that you can then kind of connect with your plugin in the form of a data dump like this, then yes, there are some dumps like that that can be used to facilitate plugins. Hunges says, that is my problem too, that I have with choosing gear if it's better because level is not always better. Absolutely. And what does it even mean for equipment to be better? But if you're a minstrel and you're wearing something with, A, armor, and B, will, and C, vitality, and D, tactical rating, and you pick up something that has those things and only those things and all the numbers are bigger, it's better, right? Like, if you want tactical rating instead of will, or I'm sorry, instead of crit rating, or if for some reason you want finesse, like those things make it more complicated. But if the numbers that you have are smaller than the numbers that you found, absolutely, then yeah, it's better, and you should probably put it on. So it's a hard question, right? Like you could see a configuration window that's like, I prefer will, I prefer like here's my top 3 things that I want, and here's the ranked choice of them. Like will's most important, then vitality, and then tactical rating, or whatever order. And then a plugin could use your ranked choices to kind of be like, okay, well, here's a rating for this piece, and is it better? Okay, yeah, you should put it on or not. But it all stems back from, how do you get the information about the item in the first place? And, well, the answer is, well, if you're a level 50 Guardian, then you care about heavy armor that is level, 45 to 50. And so even though there's a bazillion and one items in the game, you can kind of slice the item table up into small enough chunks where you're not loading a 30 megabyte Lua table into memory every time you log in. Okay, that was a sidetrack. I do not mind. All right, your plugin, says Thurlar, would also need a complete model of the combat system to be able to evaluate whether one piece of gear is better. Yeah, I think fundamentally, I wouldn't try to make a system that tries to say this gear is good because X, Y, and Z. I would only try to make a plugin that says you have said that you like X, Y, and Z, and this has more of that, so it's better. Yeah, 400 says the issue is once you cap your stat, it becomes irrelevant, so the item with less stats can be better. Yeah, absolutely. This is, if this were a good idea for a plugin, and I'm not saying it is, I think it would be most useful for characters that are leveling, especially for people who tend to level with a lot of stuff in their bags and even overflowing into their side bag? What is it? Overflow? Whatever that thing is that pops up if your bag's full and says you got more stuff. I play with a fairly lean bag, so this is a little exaggerated because it's an alt, but normally I may be using 30 of my 100 and however many slots, and then I can go out adventuring for long periods of time before that becomes a problem. And so if you are someone who is playing into the overflow, then, well, we get in the loot log that you got the thing into your overflow. We can look up its stats. So we could say, hey, you got something really cool in your overflow. You can't even see it, but you should go get it. So if you're not a maxed out player, but you're level 95, and you're just running around through Blackheart Vale, I'm guessing, and you just want to plug in to say, hey, go put that on, it's better. That's the kind of target audience. Exo says, wow, variants of this do it by simming various stat weights. Yeah, I think personal choice comes into it so much that I don't think that would be a plugin that I would personally find very useful. It just, the idea of it was fascinating, right? Like, the can it be done aspect of it was so appealing. Like, I spent so much time being like, ooh, maybe we can do it. It's Jurassic Park all over again. I think that's sort of the ultimate stumbling block for me wanting to continue developing it, is I think it could be done, but I just don't see myself using it other than as a curiosity. And if I'm not going to be using it, something that complicated and convoluted on a daily basis, really using it, it'd be hard. Like, the D tracker is something I do use on a daily basis, and it's still hard to circle back around and do the updates that are, I have a bunch of little and big things pending, and it's just hard enough to find the time for that. And that's one I literally use every day that I'm playing the game. And so, yeah, you got to pick your battles. Oh, Onyx Dragon says, I want to make plugins now since watching it. Oh, that's so kind. I hope you give it a try. One of my goals on presenting and going back and doing some of the things, even though we've done them before, like how do you put something in the options window, is I want to present that it's not necessarily that hard to do something basic, like make a button appear. Like that's a few lines of code. And we've done a lot in a couple of 100 maybe lines of code here just to make a cool little plugin. So, I hope developing a basic plugin becomes maybe a little less intimidating or maybe a little bit more appealing, even if it's for some other game. I know people like doing plugins for Factorio and whatnot, and that's fine. It's Lua. WoW plugins are Lua. LOTRO plugins are Lua. That's one of the great things about Lua. A lot of different games and systems like using it for plugins because it's straightforward, it's easy to integrate. Thunder says, always messing up gears. Never used plugins since this year. I was free to play until 6 months ago. Well, welcome. Welcome to the VIP world. I'm actually on Treebeard right now, which is a VIP only server. But it's really appealing to me because they're releasing expansions at a much slower rate than they were even on Anor, but especially on Shadowfax. And I just, it's hard for me to keep up with the pace of those other servers. Oh, Funhunja says, yes, on there too. Sweet. Are you here right now? If you are, you're anonymous. It's probably just as well. Oh, awesome. Thank you, Little Redhead and Mubat. Okay. I love chatting, but let's see if we can do one or two more things here as time is ticking on. Okay, so we were looking at a checkbox. Now, a checkbox is just like other LOTRO skinned items, is in the Turbine UI LOTRO namespace, and then it's a checkbox. And if we forget what we're looking at or what we're looking for, we can always come back in to the documentation, come into checkbox, and see what can we do with this thing. Now, in this case, I'm just going to do what I did before, so it's going to be pretty straightforward, I hope. All right, so locked checkbox. In fact, hey, let's just copy paste some stuff here. Locked checkbox. We're going to set the parent to options. Great. We're going to set its position. 70. Oh, that's further down. You know what? We're going to make it pretty high up here. And its size. That's probably fine. It was fine before. Now, there was some text on there. Let's see. Locked checkbox. Set text. Now, we haven't localized this. So for right now, we'll just do the string right here. And let's see. You know, it's funny. My day job, I do localization using C# resource files. And the iString localizers that we use there look a lot more like, you know, this is locked, where you have the actual string and it uses that string to look up a possible translation. And if it doesn't find it, it falls back onto the string itself. So if it can't find a translation for that, it just puts that in there. And it makes the code so much more readable to do it this way, where you don't have to be like, what is that text? And then go look up in another table. Now, you can do that in C# because it's going to precompile those resource tables down so that you're not doing really expensive string comparisons at runtime. But for an options window, that doesn't seem that bad. Like, it's small and you're not seeing it that often. So Thurlor says, I would denote those debug options as debug options so as not to confuse people, or do you plan to hide them? Yeah, what I tend to do, Thurlor, is I tend to go ahead and shelve that line right there. And so what people get is this. Well, okay, we don't have anything on but debug right now. But the code is all there if anyone wanted to turn on the debug, or if someone was having problems, I could be like, hey, put this line into your plugin and then reload, and then that will enable the things. So I don't personally have any problem shipping this. Like that's one of the beautiful things about plugins. The code is right there, so anyone can go in and start changing things. And so, in fact, if we take a look in source control here, oh boy, do I need to do some commits here. But if we look at the globals file, it's just that. It's just that show debugs flag. And I just mentally make a note not to ship that, right? It's not the best way of doing that, but since it can't like look at my system, I guess I could check what the account is. Can it figure out what the account is? No. I guess it could be like, oh, if I'm on the character Arta, then I'm in debug mode. But this seems like a reasonable compromise. Cool. Okay. In fact, let's go ahead and shrink that down. All right. So setting the text of this check box. What do we want? Well, what did we put back here? Locked. Lock the window in place. Okay. Lock the window in place. Good enough. I don't really like that wording, but naming things is hard, so good enough. Okay, lock the window in place. Lovely. Now, it'll default to being true, probably. Until we get a settings file going. Now, we've done that before for the Opaque quest tracker. I don't think we'll do it today either way. There's not enough time for it. But I will either just kind of roll in the thoughts we had from there, or we might touch on it next week if people want to kind of revisit that idea of what does it look to have a settings, to save those out to a file, to load them in, to have defaults. So if that's appealing to people, shout it out in chat. We'll roll it into next week. Otherwise, that might just happen in the background between things. All right, set something. What does it mean? What do we do here? Checkbox. Set checked. Excellent. Now, just like in the Opaque Quest Tracker plugin, we want to know when that checkbox changes. So how do we do that? We go ahead and say assign to checked changed. I'm going to need to type that better. The anonymous function, accepting a sender and args. And within that function, I don't know. We'll come back to that. We'll just write line checked. Cool. And that lets us go ahead and confirm, if my inventory is not in the way, that when I check this, something spits out, cool, we're in the right place. Thunder Hundreds asks, can I ask what your favorite plugins are to use? Absolutely. In fact, so oftentimes when I'm doing this plugin along stream, I'll just slide all of my active plugin and plugin data out of the way so that I start with a fresh slate each time. I can install things willy-nilly, not a problem. And so plugging along active stuff. What do we have here? Oh, that's not a fun way to look at it, is it? That is a problem. All right. Yeah. Okay. So a couple, if you like doing music in-game, or if you like doing more role-play stuff in-game, I definitely recommend checking out Songbook for managing your music files. Now, your music directory is not available to plugins, but this is another place where plugin developers are crafty and we can work around things. So the Songbook comes with a hypertext application somewhere. There, yeah, comes with a hypertext application that it can go ahead and scan. The hypertext application it can scan through the music folder, and it can look through every folder, every subfolder within there. It can find all the ABC files. It can open up the ABC files and look inside them, and it can figure out parts. It can figure out names. It can figure out whatever, and it can shove all that into a plugin data file that can then be loaded by a plugin. So super awesome, highly recommended. In fact, what? Yeah. Let me see. Do I still have? So if we come into the plugin compendium and go ahead and add lyrical, let's add that. Awesome. If we build the song library, awesome. It's going to save that plugin data file. And then from within here, we can load lyrical. Oh, sorry. We can load Songbook. What did I just install? I installed the wrong one. Let's go ahead and install Songbook. Sweet. All right. So Songbook, we can go ahead and load that up. Songbook. There's a, I think there's a note somewhere around here. Like, oh, there it is. It is a mostly opaque little note here. And when we load it up, we can see all those songs that were in the music folder have been collected together. And it even does subfolders as well. So you click on a song. Let's see. I don't even use this often enough to really have a good sense of what's going on.
You probably don't have an instrument.
I also don't have an instrument. So there are buttons up here for toggling music mode, for playing or playing synchronized with other people. Totally cool. Love it. If you play music in game at all, it's great. Also great is the lyrical plugin, and it's very useful for pre-typing up. Maybe I should make a video. Thurlow says, well, my favorite plugins keep changing. So if you want to pre-type up text that is then spit out to, looks like that's going to go to wherever my channel is going. So Gilgalad was an Elven King. And we can see I said that. Of him the harpers sadly sing. So you can pre-do this. I actually use this in chicken mode. We were doing a chicken mode on the Heart of a Hobbit stream last Thursday. And I was trying to get us to synchronize our foul fleetness, which is a dash ability. And it comes up every 2 minutes and it's good for 30 seconds. So I would just have a lyrical page open that was like, get ready to dash. Dash on 3, 1, 2, 3, go. And that way I didn't have to type that 72,000 times as we were doing free range or whatever it was. So there's all sorts of uses, not just for role-playing, but for that kind of thing as well. Or if you're doing a bunch of introductory runs through like Karn Doom or something, and you've got 72 kin mates to show Karn Doom, you might want to type up some notes and then just like lyrical your way through the introduction, whatever. So lyrical is super cool. Let's see. I think I have hearted some things over on the LOTRO interface. If that's true, that might be a really fast way to go through the rest before coming back in. Let's see, how does one see one's favorite? That's not it. Sometimes the interface for LOTRO interface does mystify me. My favorites, there we go. Okay. So just take a quick screenshot of that. Let's see, only 6 by Thurlor. Write more cool plugins. Yeah, I could spend a while going into each of these. There are some class-specific ones. If you play a Minstrel, I highly recommend the Minstrel Buff plugin. And the patch I made with the out-of-combat timer. It really helped improve my Minstrel play, or at least make me feel like I knew what I was doing a little bit better. And so many of them are so specific. Like if you like chicken session play, go get Foul Map right now. You know, it's great. If you like completing deeds, I do recommend Deed Tracker. It's the best deed tracking plugin there is. It may be the only one. Even silly things like if you like rebuilding Hidbold and would like to track your progress on that, check out the Hidbold Assistant by Galahad. It's great, and was the inspiration for the Deed Tracker plugin. So anyway, there's lots of cool things. And hopefully that gives you some ideas. It's embarrassing to have too many. I don't think so. Okay. So we have a checkbox. And when that checkbox is checked or unchecked, what we probably want is some sort of an I am in movement mode for the window. So it knows to show up. Thunderhunt just says, I only use like 3. Oh, interesting. So you use the one bag plugin. I've been really pleased with the ability in game to just go ahead and configure your bags however you like, and I tend towards the one bag myself now actually, but I just do it with the in-game configuration instead of using a plugin for it. So if you haven't seen that, you click the gear, you drag out your rows in sets of 5, and you can place it into up to 6 bags. And so if you had these 5 things that you always had that you wanted to have in a separate bag. Now, where this kind of falls down for me a little bit is I really like the auto sort feature, and I use it a lot. And I don't have a good understanding of how that works with multiple bags, so I just stick them all in one bag and it's fine. It's easier that way. Oh, you want to control where things are, so it works for you. Awesome. Okay, so our window needs a show up mode. We don't have one. We have a show, for, but what we don't have is a function hunter the decoy unlock for moving. And a corresponding lock for moving. And in this case, I think we would want to be in a special mode. And if we're in that mode, we want to just ignore everything else. Well, how do we do that? Well, we can arbitrarily add data to objects. And that's really useful and or get you into trouble depending on your perspective. So self.isUnlocked equals true. Self.isUnlocked equals false. However, because I want to check against this flag before this function might happen, let's go up to the constructor and then just go ahead and initialize it there. So it's always going to be available to us. It will be either false or true. Further points out, yeah, the one bag came out several years before they added the ability to reconfigure bags. Absolutely. And that's one of the fascinating things about plugins is you can kind of see like footprints in the sand. You can see things that used to be a problem that plugin developers were addressing. Now, this isn't the only reason. There's a bootstrap. Is that what it's called? Yeah. So there's a Bootstrap plugin manager that we looked at a few weeks ago. And one of the things, like it offers more than just this, but it allows you to see plugins and load them and that kind of thing, which once upon a time there was no built-in plugin manager. And so if one could imagine that this might have come out before the actual in-game GUI graphical plugin manager, where it would have served a vital role. But this is actually really neat. If you like having plugins but don't necessarily want them to load when you log in, do check out actually the Bootstrap plugin manager. It looks like it has some really cool kind of like, okay, now I want to load that thing because I'm doing more than just popping in for my ingredient crates. Oh yeah, and Thurler points out that in Bootstrap you can specify a load order, which could matter, especially for a plugin developer. But I could see that mattering or even being desirable. For instance, the D tracker, much as I love it, is not very performant. And each time you load or unload it, on my computer, the game kind of freezes up for a second or two while it parses a few megabytes of Lua files. And so if I'm just logging in to grab ingredient crates, that's not, we don't need a D tracker for that. And so having it optionally ready to load if I'm ready to commit to playing that character, but otherwise no, that's a lot of cool flexibility. And it just looks really cool. So we looked at that last time. There was a bug for the reload bootstrap, actually, that was probably brought in because of an update to the internal Lua parser. So the button used to work, and then it stopped working just because the internal Lua changed in some way. And I think we saw that, that might have been the same time when we saw the number parsing on 32-bit clients changing, which was great. Okay, so we have the idea of being unlocked for moving and locked for moving. Now, if we're unlocked, we probably want to not do anything else. So if self is unlocked, then return end. Cool. If we're unlocked, just don't even worry about that stuff. We're in a different mode. Cool. And then decoy damage. Yeah, we can do that. Okay. So we have a way to kind of put ourselves into ignore the real world mode. But what does that mean? Well, in here, we could go ahead and do some of the same things we do in show, but in a more controlled way. So, for instance, we could do self set visible true. Exogenesis 9 is also part of the unnecessary semicolon gang. I'll tell you, I come from a brace language background, a semicolon separated background, and C, C++, C Sharp, and it's in my fingers. Like my pinky hits that semicolon before I know what I'm doing. Okay. So we could do a basic to set visible true, set visible false, but we also need to be able to respond to being moved. And for that, remember that we were setting mouse visible to false on all of our controls. And this is where we could go ahead and undo that temporarily. Exogenesis says it just looks unclean to go without semicolons to me these days. Like the code is suddenly naked. Yeah, it's, I could see that. I could see that. Okay, so we need to be able to interact with image control outside this function. It is no longer going to be a local variable. We're going to go ahead and save that in self. And that shouldn't be anywhere else because it couldn't have been. So that's convenient. All right, where else do we have? Timer control. Now, if I were feeling a little cheating, then instead of doing these parts here, I might instead find a single use of set mouse visible, go ahead and copy the entire line, and then those are the ones that we're doing, right? And then just copy those into set visible. Oops. And then same thing, if I were feeling like wanting to speed things up a little bit, select each of those, go ahead and do true instead, and pop those into the other function. So right there, we have the ability to respond to mouse or not. Now, it might actually be really useful to pull those out into their own functions, since we're doing this a couple different places. Function, hunter at the decoy, set mouse mode. Or we'll just set mouse visible. It is visible. Okay, so in that case, we could go ahead and, again, just replace that with the variable name is visible, and bring it back in to here. And then we would just say self set mouse visible true. And same thing, self set mouse. Oh, that's not going to be good. We already have a set mouse visible. All right, we'll call it set all mouse visible. When in doubt, change the name. Yes, there's comment in the chat. Thurlor says, in any language where statements can be split across multiple lines, you need some sort of end-of-line delimiter for the reader's sanity, even if it's strictly not required for parsing. And yeah, Exogenesis says, if they're reading my code, their sanity remains in question regardless. Yeah, so what Thurlor is alluding to there is, take for instance this line here. It's kind of long, and it actually stretches too wide to read it. And something you can do is go ahead and put it onto 2 lines. Now in Lua, it might still be legal to not have that semicolon, but it is a really nice visual clue, especially if you're used to it as a developer, to be like, oh, okay, that's the end of that. The next line starts on the next. And so when you're doing a brace language where you might have braces like this, separating things, then you start to see the same thing where you'll see an open brace and a closed brace, and conceptually this is all happening in a single scope, and you can think of it that way. And so yeah, Lua has the same concept with the if then else ends, but because I'm not used to it, I don't see the code in quite the same way. Yeah. You do it enough and you get used to it, right? Okay, so we have a set all mouse visible, true, false, and there's that code. And we can go ahead and make use of that up here as well. We have to go ahead and define everything else. Otherwise, we're going to be like, oh, that doesn't exist. But at the end of the constructor, we can go ahead and make use of that same function. And that way, if we ever add a third row, for instance, if it turns out decoys also have power or something, we want to track how much power they have, well, then we only have to add it in one place to remember to turn it off and on for mouse visibility. Okay, well, I don't actually remember where we are on this, so let's try loading the 100 Deadly Decoy plugin and see where we are. Okay, we're not anywhere because I forgot to do something with that checkbox. So, cool. Let's come back in. And now that we have a unlock for moving function, we can go ahead and make use of it instead of just writing out checked. Okay, so we see that we already have a hunter deadly decoy variable. So we can make use of that to grab that window, call unlock for moving. Now, as it turns out, right now, these functions are identical except for the true and the false. I imagine they will become slightly different. They will diverge over time, which is why there are still 2 functions. But if they were to stay like this, then you might as well just pass a is locked kind of variable, pass it into all 3 of these, and be done with it, and just only have 1 function. But I think they're going to be slightly different. So that's why I haven't consolidated those down yet. Okay, awesome. So close. Okay, so we can make it appear by unchecking that. What's up? Oh, okay. So we didn't actually check if it is checked or not. So if locked checkbox is checked, then do something else. Do something else. There we go. So in here, if it's checked, we know it's locked. Great. Hunter lock for moving. Excellent. So unlock it, great. Lock it, it goes away. All right, we're almost there. The other part is actually responding to that mouse, because now we can see it's absorbing the mouse click. I can't move the camera like I could when it was ignoring the mouse and I was clicking and dragging on it. So, moving things is actually a bit more of a challenge because we are inheriting from turbine UI.window. we don't get all the fancy moving and resizing and skinning stuff that you get as part of a UI.lotro window. And so every time you have a window and you need to drag stuff around, there's that same need to have code to handle that. Now, as Thurlow pointed out before, it's always pretty much the same code. You click, the mouse is moving, the window's moving, and so eventually you just have a central library that you can say, this is now movable, and it adds those features for you. But in the interest of kind of revisiting those core concepts, let's take a look and see how it's done in the Opaque Quest Tracker. All right, so window is our main window. Let's go take a look at create main window here. I'm going to make that a little bit bigger here. Okay, so in the Opaque Quest Tracker, we were doing two things. We were accommodating both moving the opaque window and resizing the window. And resizing happened if you clicked anywhere close to an edge, it would be in resize mode. Otherwise, it would just be in movement mode. And that complicated things a fair amount, because you can see this code right here is all about, are we over the border, or are we near the border, or are we just somewhere in the middle? And so some of this is just not as necessary. Same thing in the mouse move. There's a whole section here of, is the mouse over the border? That is all of that that we're not going to have to deal with, because we're not going to resize it in that way. Thurlow says, make it stretch when you resize it. I was imagining just having a little scroll bar kind of thing here that I would use for resizing purposes. Just like this for the opacity, only it would do size instead. Stretch goal. And so that's what I was imagining, is we would unlock it to move it around. We would have a scroll bar to change it from a minimum 32 by 32 size all the way up to, say, a 200 size, with a healthy size being somewhere around 100. The more likely size. And that's actually what's happening here. This is meant to be around 100 and 100. And I could see a hunter wanting it to be bigger, but at a certain point it just starts getting a little silly. Which is fine, I mean, they're hunters. Does not get old. I'm going to do the moving part, but I'm not going to worry about the stretching. Thurlow points out, yes, absolutely, the icon does look stretched. Whoopsie. And the reason for that is actually, I think, because I have resized the window, not the icon. So we're going to get into that. Yeah, what I was doing a set stretch mode on the self and setting the size on the self, instead of doing that either on the image or adjusting the height and width based off of everything else. Now, real question, what happens if I just set the width to 100? Yeah, that's not good. So what I want to do is go ahead and change it, because I don't actually want to stretch, I don't want to stretch these bars. These bars are technically only have 32 pixels to them. They just stretch out to be 100. And I want the resolution. I want all 100 pixels to be able to have finer grained stepping down. Exogenesis asks, is there a way to resize icons without having the image display outside the bounds of the parent control? I think what you're talking about is this technique that Thurlow was mentioning last time, which is if you set the stretch mode after the image is in place and in a container of the correct size, set the stretch mode to 1 and then resize the thing it is in, and then the image stretches along with the change in size of its parent. If that's not what you were asking, oh, okay. Thurlow is correcting me. Awesome. Okay, so Thurlow is pointing out that stretch controls are not clipped by their parent, which is Interesting. Did it take mouse input? Okay. So we have this locking and unlocking mode. Now, notice the bar hasn't reset here. Now, that's not the biggest deal, but it would be nice if the bars were full, representative of what we would see when we first press the button. So we can see this timer control set with. You know, it's about time we did something about that. Oh, is it time? It's not. It's not quite time. It will be time soon. We'll go ahead and just copy this into the unlock for moving. So we're going to go ahead and set the width there, and the health. We're going to also set as well. And so that way, when this comes out, regardless of whether or not that bar had been gone, when we unlock it, oh, interesting. Oh, it doesn't like it when it's already in progress. All right, well, we'll circle back around to that. Cool, but we'll bring it out, both of those bars are full. All right, let's make a note of that. Unlocking window while it's in progress, while the decoy is active, doesn't stop the timer. Good to know. Okay. And a to-do file like that is just really helpful. When you're doing a plugin and you have an aha moment, don't let it distract you too long. Write it down, get back to what you're doing. You can come back to it later. So we have a kind of reset to how we will see it when we first bring out a decoy. And the final thing we need is we need to be responding to mouse inputs now that we've turned mouse on. So, as I mentioned, we're going to kind of imitate what we did over on the Opaque Quest Tracker, because we know that works, but it does more than we need. So, we need, when we're creating the window, interesting, that's got an embedded one, fun. Oh, chat is happening. Excellent. I love seeing solutions being proposed. Okay, so we have a window.mouse down. Oh, you know what? I wonder if it was overkill to turn on the mouse visible for everything. I wonder if having the parent. No, it's. I wonder if I've backed myself into a hole there. I wonder if the parent will be enough for mouse stuff. And what I mean by that is if I click there, if I click there, if I click there, or even in there, awesome. So we're but not awesome. Okay, yes. So just unlocking the window itself is fine. Great. Okay, so what we want is self. We want to know about mouse movements. So I'm just going to tuck that here in the end of the constructor. Self.mouse down. I wanted it to, whenever the mouse is clicked, I want this anonymous function of sender and args to be called. Now, a drag is a mouse down, a mouse move, and a mouse up. And so we are going to want to respond to each of those. So self.mouse up equals anonymous functions, sender, args, etc. And mouse move. self.mouseMove equals function ascender args, etc. Now, is that it? Well, let's take a look. That's all we did there, so it's probably sufficient. And just in case, if we're ever not sure that we've done the right thing, remember, we can just go ahead and write something out to the standard chat channel and double check our assumptions. So if we're in self mouse down, self mouse up, now there is a warning to be had. The mouse move function will get called multiple times a second. So you don't ever want to write out to the console in here except for debug purposes, because it will not perform well in a live plugin. That being said, let's go ahead and take a look. We're going to unlock this thing. Cool. So we can see the mouse moving is getting called a bunch. If I click, it's a mouse down. If I release, it's a mouse up. Now, an important thing, if I click down within here and I move around and then I release, the control over here still gets the mouse up even though we're no longer over. And even though I wouldn't get the mouse up otherwise. Bullroarer is pointing out that I could probably be more efficient here. Let's see. Put s equals turbine.shell.writeLine. Although I'm not sure I would want to name it after a C function. So what we just did there is we said the variable put s for put string back from our C days. Whenever you see that, we're actually talking about this function here, so it's a function pointer. And then here, go ahead and call that function with this text. And it's just like as if we had done turbine.shell.writeLine. Oftentimes in a plugin, I will have helper functions like debug or warning or info, where they might write out text in different colors or do other things like, this is just for your information, and then whatever. There we go. Chat spam equals turbine.shell.writeLine. But the magic of this, there's nothing special here. We could just call it thoroughLore, right? And we could just call the function thoroughLore with self.mouseDown. That's fine too. Like there's nothing special about put s specifically. Or it says I'm a fast typer. It almost doesn't matter. Actually, what I am is I make heavy use of copy paste, and I make heavy use of autocomplete. So self.image control is just I am tab, right? So get yourself a text editor that supports multi-select, that supports autocomplete, that supports all these fun things. At least if you're going to be doing a lot of typing like I do. Cool. So we know this is working, but like we saw, there's a lot of chat spam coming out. So let's stop doing that and start doing what we know we need to do. Okay, so what we can do is kind of work backwards. We know in the mouse move function and the mouse up function, well, the mouse up is actually easiest. So mouse up, we can do self.isMouse down equals false. Cool. Done. 1 out of 3 functions. Oh, I just got this awesome new keyboard. It's a super indulgence. Oops. If you ever get a chance to splurge on yourself, I highly recommend the Kinesis keyboard, as seen in Men in Black 1. No. So the Kinesis keyboard, this is not a paid promotion, I just love them. They have bowl shapes where your fingers go in, so and each one is slightly longer than the previous one. So in a standard hand, your middle finger tends to be longer than the fingers to the side, which tend to be longer than the fingers to the side of that. and the bowl shape reflects that. You can kind of see how they're contoured. Instead of doing the horizontal, the 1/4 offset that you need to do on a physical keyboard for hammer striking motions, which has been carried through to computer keyboards, they just stack the keys vertically, and you make use of your thumbs, which are otherwise pretty bored on a normal keyboard. So absolutely love it. I just got started playing with it yesterday and today in my new office, and it's super duper awesome. So again, it's a bit of a splurge, but it's fantastic. Love it. I do type a little slower on there though because the keys, there's a few keys in different directions, like the arrow keys. I am still getting used to left, right being over here and up, down being over here, and a few other differences. Is it blatantly cheating? I like easy mode for things as much as possible, and so if I'm going to be typing a lot, I want an easy mode. So speaking of keyboards, I mean, I could go off on that subject, but if you ever want to feel like you're piloting a spaceship, no, that's not it. Hang on. There we go. Okay. If you ever want to feel like you're piloting a spaceship, this is a data hand, and also a very splurgy thing. And because I do use Dvorak and not QWERTY, it didn't really work for me. But each finger can go up, down, left, right, and in for 5 possibilities with very little movement. Like these are a few millimeters of movement to get each key. And of course, the thumbs are also doing their own things like backspace and enter and whatnot. And so if you ever want to just sit there and feel like you are controlling the Enterprise or something, get a chance to try one of these. It's wonky. Okay. Neat. But where are the foot pedals? They're not shown in that picture. But yeah, you can attach foot pedals to those. Actually, you can attach foot pedals to the Kinesis one as well. There's a little RJ11 jack that you can plug in for the data line. You might have enough controls for the Warden with that thing. Now, the downside of something like that, which is super hands-on, is it is a little tough to incorporate a mouse. In fact, if I don't know if it came up, but there's a mouse mode where you can use these to kind of guide the cursor around, like one of the nubbins on an old trackpad kind of thing, or as an alternative to a trackpad. So you can guide mouse cursors around with. Maybe it's this little function here, but yeah, that is. I do not think there's a foot version with that many articulators, but there are ways you can combine this with foot pedals. I think the foot pedal would let you shift modes, like if you wanted to do things like shift or numpad or whatever. You can do that with your thumbs here, but maybe the foot pedals offered something like that. Oh well. Anyway, we are well beyond plugins at that point, but yes. Alternate keyboards are great. Okay, so if we ignore the over-the-border part of this function's not that bad. We need to know how much the cursor has moved, and I'm just going to lift that wholesale. And what does this work? All of these values are in pixels. So if your mouse clicked down and then has moved 7 pixels, we want to just see that number 7 in these numbers. So that's all those are. But we're just calling them delta X and delta Y. X and Y in this case are just pixels. Cool. And we just want the window to move the same amount. It kind of makes the window sticky to the mouse cursor at that point. But of course, that's a self, not a window, because we're doing things differently. Always different. Now, we don't have a window left and a window top, so we are going to need to grab that as well. Which means we'll need... Oh, and we need the mouse current X and mouse current Y. And the mouse down X and the mouse down Y. So we need all of those things. Awesome. Thunder Hunter says, I don't even use a mouse with more than 2 buttons. And Little Red Head points out, let's see. What I find this mouse very helpful It's got 12 buttons on the side that you can use with your thumb, and that's very handy. It maps very nicely to the 1 through 12 that we already have here, and so you can also use the fourth button on the mouse to turn that into a shift, and so you can do 1 through 12 and shift 1 through 12 super easy just with one hand. And then if you combine that with your left hand that's on Control Shift Alt, you can do 36 keys super easy, or I guess 48 at that point. 48 abilities in LOTRO just with the alternate keys here and with the thumb on the mouse. So as long as your thumb does not get sore from that. What was that one called?
It was the G600, I think.
All right, so that's the Logitech G600, which is apparently an MMO gaming mouse. Who knew? And so, stop it. So that's what it looks like with a better picture on the side. So you have buttons 9 through 20, they're called, but inherently they're mapped through as if you were touching buttons 1 through 0, and then brace to the side. So Onyx Dragon asks a question that's actually on topic. Thanks for that. So in the plugin manager, yes, if you make changes to the plugins folder, then the plugin manager here will not see it without you pressing the refresh button here. Do make sure if you're making changes in your plugins directory, maybe using the plugin compendium to install new things, do make sure you hit that refresh. LOTRO is not scanning the plugins directory. Nothing shows up. Wait, but, so you type plugins list or you do the refresh button and nothing shows up. Okay. Is it the right user folder? I mean, it's a little silly, but if you have multiple user folders on your machine, make sure it's the right one. Other than that, that's... Let's see. You said you typed it in... What are the rings? Yeah, so for me, and this folder can be different depending on how old your installation is, I think. But for me, it's documents, the Lord of the Rings Online, and then plugins. And so that would be the first thing, is just double check that you are in a place where you see user preferences, where you see, let's see, if you take screenshots, you should see them show up here. And you should see a folder called UI. If you're not seeing those things, that may not be the correct folder. Exogenesis has another great question, or another great comment. In plugins, you should either see a developer name or just a plugin file. So you do need to see that .plugin file somewhere in the directory structure for LOTRO to see it. I don't know how deeply it searches, but it definitely searches the first two levels. All right, so I'll stop talking on that for a second and see if any of that helps. Oh, Hunja says you have fibromyalgia and all the pain in your hands. Yeah, this is a 12-button mouse with your thumb is not a good solution for that. Absolutely, this may actually not be a great for our wrists in general, but it's kind of addicting to have that many buttons at hand. That was one of the reasons I was looking at the data hand, not to harp back on things that are not plugin related, but the data hand, there it is. One of the reasons I was really entranced by it was how little movement a finger needed to do and how little pressure a finger needed to do. This was meant to be an ergonomic solution to people who had problems either with distance or the force required to press keys. And so it was a very little force to press the key and a very little distance to get there in the first place. And that's why I was looking at it in the first place. And not that you should get this, but that was why it was on my mind, was tackling both of those issues at the same time. The distance your fingers need to move and the pressure that they need to contact with. And pressing a key for an average, fairly hand-usable person is not a problem, but pressing a key a few 100,000 times, it starts to add up. And as someone who does press keys for a living, it's always on my mind of, are there better options out there? So, oh, Thurlar says, can you still buy the data hen? You know, I got mine off of eBay a long time ago when I was playing around with it, and so I honestly couldn't tell you. I just know that it existed once upon a time. Okay, you have a plugins Onyx Things info bar with an info bar plugin. Make sure the info bar plugin is in Onyx Things, not in info bar. Oh, as Thurlord just said, I don't even need to be looking at that. Okay, neat. So we were looking at incorporating moving, and I think we can do that real fast, finish this up before it gets to be midnight here. So we saw that there were some things here. Let's see, display width, what's going on there? Is that just being used in here? Is that being used at all? Hard to tell. Oh, but one thing we want to do is maybe think about incorporating the on-screen function, which is to say, if we drag this anywhere off of the screen, maybe don't let them do that. So, when dragging, use on-screen helper to not let them drag it off the screen. Now, there are some reasons why you might actually want someone to drag a window off the screen. Like the plugin manager, I would love for this to take up less space on the screen, but they are using a very similar feature where if part of the window would extend beyond the client area, it just doesn't let you do that, which is fine, I guess. But some days I would really like to not have that take up so much of the space. For this decoy thing, I think it makes a lot of sense for us to go ahead and incorporate that same basic logic of you can have it anywhere on the screen, but it can't go off the screen. You could actually have variations on that where it can't go more than half off the screen, or it can only go off screen to the right, because then you can still see the thing ticking down. Like you can always play around with that, but that's a note for later. Cool. Okay. And let's see. Okay, that's settings. We're not dealing with settings yet. So the only thing that's left is on the mouse down. We do need to go ahead and get the mouse down X and the mouse down Y. And let's see. So we called that mouse position and window position. So we do want to go ahead and get, these two and save that. Where is the mouse and where is the window when we start this? And of course, these references to window are just going to cause us problems because we didn't have an embedded window. One of these days I will learn to write consistent UI code, but today is not that day. So we have a mouse position and a mouse window. Where's the mouse, where's the window when we start the drag, so that when we move, we can figure out how much these things need to move. Okay. What about the window size? Do we use that anywhere? Looks like in resizing. Neat. And of course, we want to know that the is mouse down is true, and we can make use of that. So, in the mouse moving, if self dot is mouse down, then do all these calculations. But optimally, we don't want to do calculations if we don't have to. So if the mouse is moving around to the window and the mouse button isn't down, let's not do that. Oh hey, Onyx has figured out that there was a syntax error in the XML. Absolutely, that's actually a really good point. If your XML does not parse, then LOTRO doesn't throw an error. It doesn't list it in the plugins. That's it. And so once the plugin file reads correctly, then you can try to load, and then you start getting error messages. But until there's an actual Lua file to start parsing, I don't think there's any error messages. It just says, oh, that wasn't a plugin file. Never mind. The dot plugin file changes so rarely, usually just version bumps, that I think that's probably a fine trade-off to make. Like, they didn't have to write code to figure out and dump error messages and whatever. Like, it's fine, but every once in a while it's like, wait a second, what's going on here? Okay, cool. So we've made use of the is mouse down. Awesome. I don't know. Let's find out. Let's find out if this works. Hunter did the decoy. Let's load that. Let's unlock it, and sweet, we can move it. So that's the basic structure of movement code. Figure out where where the cursor is, where the window is, and then whenever the cursor moves, say by going 100, 200 pixels to the right, move the window that far from where it started as well. And when you release, stop doing it. So that's basic dragging code. And then when we unlock it, we can see it's where we put it. Awesome. And neat. That's half the fun of working on this particular plugin, is seeing the decoy blow up when it, quote unquote, should blow up. It's delightful. Okay, so that's the idea. When the mouse is clicked, capture that we are clicked and where we were clicked. If the mouse goes up, we're done with it. And then during movement, we just need to do those calculations of getting those two values of where the mouse and the window were, figuring out where the mouse is, calculating the differences, setting the position. Done. Chromite asks a question. Do you have the ability to see if you have the trait line / skill available, and therefore the visibility of it? When you say the visibility of it, do you mean, whether it should look like this deadly decoy or just a regular decoy? Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think, okay, so Thurlow says skill but not trait line. So when you trait yellow, you get the decoy by definition. And when you have spent 5 points in yellow, you get upgraded to deadly decoy. So it sounds like Thurlow, that's a maybe. Just the window itself. Well, when you do not have it unlocked for movement, like we have just developed, then it only shows up when you are either debugging it or when you deploy a decoy. Exogenesis says you can determine by a chat message when you swap. Oh, good point. So let's see. Where does that go? I know I've seen that message go somewhere. Advancement, maybe? Advancement filter. Nice. Can I make another tab? No, I've run out of tabs. All right. We'll go ahead and add advancement to the all. Great. Okay. So, yeah, changing traits here. I think... Oh, you are asking because you use the decoy for pre-debuffing bosses. I lay down traps and swap to redline. Yeah, I think what would happen then is this would show up, and then you would swap, and as soon as this runs out, it's not going to launch again until the next time you would lay down a decoy, which you're not going to do. So as soon as the thing blows up or is defeated, it's gone and it doesn't come back. So I think that kind of default behavior of it shows up if you deploy a decoy, and if you don't deploy a decoy, it doesn't show up. kind of works for that use case, or if you're just yellow line all the time. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't see kind of a conflict in use case there. Okay, well, while any chat trickles in, let's go take a look back at that to-do. So we wanted to make an option on the options page to unlock for dragging and add support for dragging. And so I'd say we did that. You know what? I've just realized we don't actually have like a README file here. So I should probably make one of those. README. Version 1.0.0. So, added support for dragging window around. Cool. Yes, Chrome I hadn't realized. Yeah, one of the things we did today was the icon wasn't movable. It was always in the same place. And so if you unlock it, we just implemented the ability to move it around, say right there on the radar in the important spot. And then once you've locked it, it'll disappear until you go ahead and do your decoy, and then it shows up. And currently, it's always on top. So even if you pull up the map or some other UI element, you're always going to be able to see when that decoy is about to blow up and how much health it has if things are hitting it in combat. And bam. Chromite has also identified the icon stretching. Yeah, the problem is that right now the code is stretching the whole thing and not just the icon. I think so. It's not stretching as much vertically as it is horizontally. That's definitely a thing on the to-do list because right now these bars are also 32 pixels stretched to 100 pixels, and so they're not taking advantage of that full resolution. We could get finer grain tick 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 going down for the timer, or the health could be more than just like 1/36th or 1/32nd of the health bar. If we go ahead and use those as the full pixels and are only stretching the image. So that's on the to-do list. A nice refinement. Obviously, we could ship with it just like this, but I feel like one or two more tweaks, some settings that can save where the position is, for instance, would be nice, because as soon as I unload this and load, we are back to that default position right here, which is fine, but okay. Baz also agrees that it is difficult to tell about traiting. I think for such a streamlined plugin as this, it's fine. You either have the decoy and are using it, or you don't. And once you've deployed a decoy, in 15 or 60 seconds, it goes away. Okay. Fill out other features that already exist. Just a note to myself. Thurlor says you could squeeze the bars down from 1,000 pixels and get sub-pixel progress. That is a thing that I could do. I agree. I think I will probably not do that. But I like the outside the box thinking, because the box is 1,000 pixels. Okay, so we don't need that one anymore. We've got this, and so there are a couple other things that I do want to do. When we add a slider bar to allow this thing to get bigger, that's when we'll go ahead and redo how this thing is being bigger. And that concept of these bars are always 32 pixels wide, we'll go ahead and fix that in the same process. EXO has a function that basically checks for the existence of specific skills on each class to determine trait line, but can't scrape traits in the same way. Okay, that sounds fascinating. Yeah, if this were being a more aggressive plugin and trying to present more information or maybe ahead of time, that symbol would always show there but be kind of gray, or do more complicated things, I think it would be really nice to know, like, does this apply? On the other hand, right now, if you're not a yellow line hunter, just don't load the decoy plugin and you'll be fine. Cool. Okay. So there's all sorts of fun stuff I want to do to make this plugin better. If you want an advanced copy of it, just shoot me a message here or on a Discord server if we share a Discord server or something, and I can send you what I've got right now. Obviously, it's not ready for prime time, what with the lack of any sort of a save file, but it's certainly fun to see it in action. Okay, with that being said, I think this is a good time to break for the night, for we are rapidly approaching midnight in my time zone. So, let's clear any last minute things in chat while I get a drink. Nice. I want to thank you all for awesome chats going on. I really appreciate you being here, but not more than that, interacting with each other and with me. It's been great having you here. Baz says, working with trait-related skills is a painful rabbit hole to go into. Yeah, it sounds like. I haven't had a chance to do a lot with skills yet, and so that was one of the attractive parts of working on this Deadly Decoy one, was to say, okay, let's just drill into a single skill and see, what do I know about it? What can I learn about it? What does the wiki know about it? What does the wiki have wrong? Turns out a non-zero number of things on all of those. Thunderhund just says, have a nice evening. It's almost time to get some sleep here too. I know. We're on Central European time and it is dark out. All right. Well, then that is all we're going to cover today. Thank you so much for joining me on this exploration of LOTRO plugins. I do hope to see you next week. And until then, keep plugging along.